This short video will discuss Major Assignment 1, reviewing the story. In SWA-1, or our first short writing assignment, you were tasked with going to the Moth website and looking through different stories told by different storytellers on that website and picking one that appealed to you. Then you were asked to summarize that story and respond to that story so that you could really start identifying and writing about your topic. For Major Assignment 1, you are going to take that story and create a review of that story. So, as we've been learning about in Chapter 15 and in the previous lecture, we've been talking a lot about what the genre of review is like, what kinds of reviews we encounter in our everyday life, where can we see reviews, hear about reviews, and your challenge in Major Assignment 1 is to write your own review of the story that you picked from the Moth website. So here's what you need to do to get started with the process. You will notice that this information comes from page 325 to 330 in our textbook, Everyone's an Author. This section is called Writing a Review, a Roadmap. I highly recommend you take a look at this information. It has some really great questions to get you thinking about your topic. And if you follow along with the roadmap, developing Major Assignment 1 is really just going to be a breeze. So the first thing that you need to consider when you're thinking about your topic is think about the rhetorical situation. So I don't know if you noticed on the Moth's website, but there are hundreds of stories on there. So you need to think about what your audience knows about the story and what they expect. So one of the reasons why in SWA-1 I had you write a bit of a summary is because I have listened to The Moth for a long time. It is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to on a road trip, but I have certainly not heard every story on The Moth and don't have an immaculate memory where I can remember, every single story that I've heard on that podcast. So as your audience, it'd be helpful, right, if you gave me some summary of what happened in the story. So you have to think about what your audience knows and what your audience expects. I know what the Moth is, so you wouldn't have to go into really deep explanation of that. Your audience knows what the Moth is. However, I don't know who your storyteller is, and I don't know the title of the story, and I don't know the details of the story. So you have to make sure that you're giving some sort of summary. So think about that. Think about what I would expect in a review. We've talked about what are good qualities of reviews in the last lecture. We've looked at some reviews. Think about what is going to give you the strongest set of ethos that you can get. And then consider your stance. Often when students think about considering a stance, they think that means that it has to be pro or con, this is right or wrong. But a stance can be more nuanced than that. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're just like, I'm for tacos on Tuesday, or I'm totally against tacos. I mean, I don't know what kind of monster you are if you're against tacos, but you get my point. Like that is a stance. However, another type of stance might be having a viewpoint on something that maybe isn't so right or wrong, yes or no. For example, you might think about, how the story might comes across to you. Like, what do you think of this subject? What do you think of the story that's being told? How do you think it's being told? What do you think your audience should think about it? Okay? Think about how you want your audience to not only see the storyteller that you're highlighting, but what you want the audience to see about yourself, right? You should also think about the larger context. So context is one of the key words from this unit, and also, we've talked about context in the first lectures. We've talked about how context is all of that background information that's surrounding any kind of issue or any sort of story or any sort of media that you're looking at. So you want to look at the larger context. So it's important to give that background kind of information to your reader. And also consider your choice of medium. In this case, your choice of medium is already chosen for you. It's going to be a Word document. Make sure it is a Word document, doc, or docx, sorry. Make sure it is a Word document, not a PDF, not a JPEG, a Word document. I want it properly formatted in MLA with works cited, etc. So you should consider your media is chosen for you. But you might, and then your design, the design is already chosen for you. It will be an MLA format. It will be cited anytime you summarize, paraphrase, etc. So the design and the media are chosen for you. It is a traditional academic essay in MLA format, 3 full pages, not including the works cited. Okay. I don't know why it made that funny little noise, but it did. So the next thing you want to think about when you're thinking about developing your major assignment 1, your draft for the discussion board, and your SWA-2, which isn't really a draft, but really is just like getting you think about it. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The second thing you want to think about is evaluating your subject. This information is on page 327, and then a little bit on to page 328, and everyone's an author. Really take a look at this, because these questions that it's asking in the text, I think is really going to help you develop the body of your review. For example, it talks about thinking about your own first impressions. The text talks about, what's your reaction and why. Think about what your first impressions were of the storyteller. Examine the story closely and explain those aspects of the story. How was it delivered? What were the high points, the low points? And again, make a judgment about your subject and make it a nuanced judgment. If you say it's a good story and that's it, that literally tells no one anything. Just like when you give someone feedback on the discussion board and you're like, great point, that means nothing. Okay, it means absolutely nothing. Great story, great point. No, that doesn't mean anything. That's just throwaway words. Better is saying, you make a great point when you discuss A and B, and that is why I think you're making a strong argument. Okay, so yes, but and. You always want to be telling us the why and the how someone is doing something. You can't just say, they did a great job. Okay, what? Why? How? How did they do a good job? How did they do a bad job? Why did they do a good job? What were the elements that made it a good job? So think about the how and the why when you're making your judgment. And then, of course, anticipate other points of view. If you have to always think about any counter arguments that you might need to acknowledge. If you're going to review something and give your opinion on it, you might have to think about what other people might think about that. For instance, maybe you say, in my opinion, this story ended a little abruptly. Some people might have found that she ended the story at the correct place, but in my opinion, it ended abruptly. So you're considering a counter argument there. So another thing that you'll want to look at in creating your draft for the peer review this week is organizing and starting writing, right? So SWA-2, short writing assignment 2, I just want to pull that up really quick here, is should be completed in the first part of the week. And this is all about process and planning. So I want you to take that feedback that you've been giving on SWA-1 about the topic and the summary and start to build on that a little bit more. I want you to look over those pages that I've been telling you about at 325 to 330 and Everyone's an Author, and have that handy when you start to make SWA-2. You're going to be writing a few paragraphs that will help you start to create a rough draft. And there are specific questions that I want you to answer in SWA-2. So remember, each unit, not just this unit, but each unit, there'll be short writing assignments. And those short writing assignments are designed to help you answer questions and build the major assignment. There is no busy work. It's all there to help you build the major assignments, right? So in this one, we're building on to SWA-1 and we're starting to add some more. So you're going to be exploring the rhetorical situation, what we were just talking about. You're going to be evaluating your subject, adding more to that. And in your response. So ultimately, you're going to end up with, 3 or 4 more paragraphs in SWA-2, 3 or 4 paragraphs in which you're talking more about it. And so this is going to be helpful to you because if you think about it, in SWA-1, you've created a summary and like a mini response to get your kind of ideas flowing. And then in SWA-2, you're going to think about the rhetorical situation and do some evaluation of the subject. So if you look at those 2 documents together, you can really start to see a rough draft kind of forming. So you'll want to take SWA-1 with feedback and SWA-2 and use those to help you start planning out a rough draft. So you'll want to develop a rough draft of your major assignment 1 for the discussion board this week. So use the information that you created in SWA-1, use the stuff that you created in SWA-2 to help you make that rough draft, okay? So everything builds on each other. Don't overthink it. It's all building. It's all building to go together, okay? And you're going to place that rough draft on the discussion board, okay? And that is a rough draft of MWA-1. So that is so we talked about the rhetorical situation, we talked about the evaluation, we talked about organization. I do just want to give you some more information on the final copy of the paper, which will be due at the end of week 4, not week 3, but the end of week 4. So you'll know what you're working towards in your rough draft. So for your final copy, you'll want it to be 3 full pages. I think for your rough draft on the discussion board, it is acceptable for it to be, around 2 pages in length. You don't have to have it all figured out for the rough draft, but you should have a really good start. You should have at least 2 pages. And if you're using SWA-1 and SWA-2 to help you create the draft and think about it, having 2 pages towards the review shouldn't be that difficult. Some students will go ahead and just write the whole thing and have it done. I mean, that would probably be smart. But if you're not quite there yet, don't panic. So you'll want to take that rough draft, and then in week 4, you'll be turning it into the 3 full pages for major assignment 1. Okay, so 3 full pages, not counting the works cited. The only sources that you need for this are going to be the story itself and in-text citations for anytime you summarize, paraphrase, or directly quote from the story. This is not a research project. You do not need extensive outside sources. That being said, I know that a few of you picked one of the stories where the guy references a poem of some sort, so you also included a link to the poem. That's fine. But you really shouldn't need any outside sources for this assignment. So if you do, kind of run, if you're worried, like, oh, can I use this extra source? You can email me, but, for the most part, you really should just have your story. If you do have an extra source because you need to clarify something, like that one story that some of you picked that the guy talks about a poem, that's fine, but you shouldn't be doing any extra research for this, really. So hopefully this video will help you when you're thinking about what you're really doing for SWA-2 and the rough draft, and then ultimately where you're going when creating major assignment 1. So I just want to really quick look back over the schedule of activities with you, because I think that what some students have gotten a little confused by this. I don't know why, but some students thought from in week 1 they had to write the whole major assignment. That will never happen. Each unit, we're going to do small, short writing assignments each week that are going to help us to build an eventual rough draft, and then we'll be given a week to revise and edit that into a final copy, okay? So, for example, just like I said again, I'm going to repeat myself because I want to make this really clear. We knew that at the beginning that we're going to be writing a review of a story, but we're going to take it slow to write that review, okay? So you kind of always know where you're going to eventually end up, but you don't have to worry about all the details until you get there, okay? So we knew we were going to be writing a review, so we started learning about, hey, how do we understand different genres? Okay, so what exactly is a review? Let's listen to some stories and talk about reviewing the stories. Let's think about a story that we found on our own. And then the next week, and then let's summarize in SWA-1. Let's respond to that story so Professor Buzzard can give us a little bit of feedback on what we're thinking about so far. And then in this week, in week 3, you're going to say, okay, so I've already summarized my story. I've already started responding to it. Let's take that response a little further and do a little more process and planning of what else do I need to talk about to make it a good review? And so you're going to be adding to that, and then you're going to set, and that is going to be your SWA-2, right, in week 3. And then you're going to take all that information and magic it all into a rough draft of MWA-1 to post on the discussion board on Friday. And so everything's building and building, and you're going to give each other some peer feedback on Friday. You'll have the weekend, and you'll need to do that by Monday night. I wish I could do it in the middle of a week, but I think it's helpful for students when they're having to write to have kind of the weekend sometimes to think about some things. And then you're going to take that draft after you get your peer feedback. I'll post in the news feed and send an email because I'll scan through the discussion and look at all the drafts and kind of put together hey, here are some reminders. Make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z, right? And I'll post about that at the beginning of week 4. And then week 4, you're going to spend your time revising and editing your MWA-1 into a final copy. In week 4, there'll be a little checklist for editing and revision. It'll give you some time to get extra help at the ASC if you need it. And then you'll have until Monday, February 10th to turn in the final copy. So if you were feeling a little confused about where the short writing assignments fit or how they go, everything builds upon everything. There's no little thing that I'm making you do that doesn't work towards helping your goal of creating the major assignment. Take it one bite at a time this semester, and that will give you your best chance for success. deal. I want to see all of you successful. I want everyone to earn an amazing grade, but the only way you're going to do that is if you play along, follow the instructions, read everything, write all the things. If you do the little things I tell you to do, I promise you, I don't sit around thinking of ways to make your life miserable. I really am sitting around thinking of what are the most organized ways I can teach you how to be a stronger writer. What are the ways that are the most effective and the most efficient? And hopefully that makes a little more sense about how this is all laid out. I feel like I explained that in the course layout video, but only 20 of you watched it. So, if you're feeling confused, there's 82 of you in the class and 20 of you watched it. That could be why you're confused. Don't know. But, make sure you're watching these videos. I'm making them to help you. Really, I am. So that kind of concludes the information on Major Assignment 1. That also concludes like some more information about how to read the schedule. And hopefully you have found this helpful. If you do end up having any further questions, you can always go to the course discussion board. And if you click on questions, comments, and concerns, you can leave some general questions that you're having. I do appreciate when you guys put them there, because that way, if you're having a question about the content of the course, chances are someone else might be, and that kind of helps everyone. So I hope this is helpful to you, and best of luck as you're writing your SWA-2 this week and and then subsequently your rough draft. And happy revising.